You're on the legal line, answering your questions about labor, entertainment, and other legal issues that concern you. Here's your host, labor and entertainment attorney, Dennis Kennelly.
Legal Line with Dennis Kennelly. It's Wednesday. It's Thursday, actually. Just checking to see if everybody's listening. It's Thursday and we're all dry, which has recently not been the case, but it's good to be with you again. Remind you, this is our show, and our show means that your phone calls and emails help us a great deal. The phone-in number, 661-298-5487. Email at dennis@hometownstation.com. So we welcome any of your questions. Today's topic is going to be wage and hour issues, and that's a legalistic way of saying how much you get paid, when you get paid overtime, is the employer paying you everything he or she is supposed to, and a panoply of other rights that you have, and it's amazing in this state. We'll also, early in the proceedings, deal with, I think, the hottest topic of the day, which is the recent executive order signed by President Trump, talking about deporting a larger percentage of undocumented immigrants in this country. And the particular tone of our discussion is going to be the unintended consequences of that action, which include a lot of economic, I think, chaos based on information that we already have, especially in California. And we'll get into that a little later. As soon as I tell you who our guest is Eve Wagner. She's an experienced labor and employment attorney from Beverly Hills. She's also the chairman of the Beverly Hills Bar Association Labor and Employment Section, and a mediator. And she'll tell us a bit about mediation, but she's done a great deal of employment law work, as I have, representing both employees and employers. So we're looking forward to her comments. Eve, are you on the line yet?
I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your practice? I think everyone would like to hear about it.
Sure. So I've been practicing for way too long, 30 years. Time sure flies. And as you mentioned, I represent both plaintiffs and defendants, and have been doing that throughout my career in the employment area. And I also speak and do corporate trainings and pre-litigation counseling. And I also serve as a mediator and arbitrator, and have been doing that for about 14 years.
Well, that's interesting. And we'll get into the mediation practice, which I think is very, very interesting for a lot of people, because I don't think most people understand mediation, and many people don't understand the difference between mediation and arbitration, and we'll get into that.
That's very true.
Now, the interesting thing is an article in the LA Times this morning that I think is extremely timely talks about the potential effects of the executive order that President Trump signed this week, where he's indicating that he's going to up the number of undocumented people that are deported. And what was interesting to me, and I think we talked earlier before the show, was interesting to you, is the fact that in California, 10% of the workforce is undocumented. And if you're doing it by category, in the agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting industry, 45% of those individuals working there do not have proper documentation. In construction, it's 21%, and in food service and other hospitality areas, it's 17%. So if you can picture a world where magically, if Mr. Trump gets what he wants and those people disappear, I have a feeling the people running those industries are going to be scratching their heads figuring out, how do I get the crops picked? Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's going to have a huge ripple effect on corporations and on workers and on consumers.
Exactly, because the price, for example, if you start having to pay higher wages, and there's already a move in Los Angeles and a number of other cities and nationally, frankly, for a higher minimum wage, you're going to find out that most people don't really understand how this part of the economy works. And it's kind of the doctrine of unintended consequences. In Mr. Trump's mind, it's likely a good idea, but, and this is a personal opinion, I don't think he has thought it all the way through as far as what the consequences are going to be. Not to mention
it's going to be pretty dramatic.
And not to mention the human consequences of the people that are going to be impacted. So it will be really, really interesting to see what, if anything, happens with his plan and how he implements it. Going back on your career, have you ever had a situation where any employer you represented wound up losing a vast portion of his or her workforce as a result of the old-fashioned immigration raid?
I actually have not.
Nor have I.
I know people who did, but I never actually experienced that in the last 30 years. So it really will be pretty dramatic. Interestingly, for the first time, one of my clients just got served with a subpoena for tenant records on somebody from Homeland Security. So in all these years, I haven't seen that before either. So it's interesting.
Now, one of the things I'd like to ask you about, since we're going to be talking about wage and hour today, is what are the hot topics that are coming into your office? What are the phone calls about? What are the consultations about? What are people experiencing that are leading them to come to an employment lawyer?
So one of the most interesting things is these days, most lawsuits that are being filed are employment-related, and the employment-related cases that we're seeing, a large majority include or are solely wage and hour issues. So independent contractor versus employee, exempt versus non-exempt, and a whole host of violations that go along with misclassification. There's also the Fair Pay Act that was expanded last year and then further expanded in 2017. So we're expecting to see more cases filed under that.
Now, there haven't been any appellate decisions on the Fair Pay Act, have there?
Not yet. The changes are significant, but new enough that we're not seeing any decisions yet really explaining what the new law means.
To your knowledge, has anyone even gone to a jury verdict?
Not to my knowledge. I've seen a few lawsuits filed, and because the discovery is so extensive and it's burdensome on both sides, the cases have settled quickly. So I haven't seen or heard about a jury trial yet. That doesn't mean there hasn't been one, but there haven't been any big verdicts that are floating around that we're hearing about yet.
Well, why don't you explain to our audience exactly what the Fair Pay Act is and how it impacts the day-to-day operations of companies?
So the Fair Pay Act basically ensures that initially it involved gender, and then it was expanded to include race and ethnicity, that people that are doing substantially similar work within a company are being paid the same. And one of the other amendments that came in January of this year was that you also can't look at what somebody was making at a prior job and say, just based on that, I can pay them less, because they may have been discriminated at the prior job. So they really changed the standards. It used to be the exact same job. Now it's a substantially similar job. That's expanded the scope for people to sue. It used to be within the same actual city, and now it's broadened out. So that's why we're expecting to see a lot more claims, and it may actually mean that the pay disparity gap will close some in California, at least.
What do we know what the so-called pay disparity gap is in both this state and nationally? Because I think it's surprising when you hear it.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. I haven't looked as of 2017, but it was around about 70 to 100. Make about 70% of what men make.
It's a funny story. My late wife, who was a lawyer, indicated to show the effects of pay bias by gender. She once said that when she was looking at a career, she wanted to avoid careers dominated by women because they tended to be underpaid. And I think the
there's a lot about why, and one of the issues is, do women, are they not aggressive as men as asking for raises? They undervalue their services, discrimination, obviously, stereotypes. All of those things contribute to it. So California finally put some teeth into the law. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then, as I mentioned, in 2017, they expanded it out to race and ethnicity. So it's really quite broad. So I think as more and more lawyers become aware of these changes, we're going to start seeing more claims under the Act.
Well, I had a client ask me, what happens if my prospective employer asks me what my current salary is or what my salary was at my last place of work? Do I have to answer it? Now, what would you advise that individual?
So here's the problem. If you don't answer it, you probably won't get the job.
Exactly.
If you answer it. So most people will probably go ahead and answer the question. If it turns out then you get the new job and you find out that, wait a minute, they used my prior salary and now I'm making less than somebody of a different gender, race, or ethnicity, then you may have a claim.
An excellent point. I think it also brings up the fact that you should, when you are interviewed, you notice that the interviewer is taking notes. The prospective employee should take notes as well, because those can be valuable. Because one of the popular deposition questions or witness stand cross-examination questions is, how come you remember this? How can we go all the way back to a single incident 4 or 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And if you're able to say, well, I have my notes, can I refresh my recollection? It tends to make the witness a lot more credible. So
that's definitely true. One thing I wouldn't do, though, is tape record the conversation without permission. That's illegal.
Exactly. I think both of us have had that horrible occasion where somebody comes in with the cassette.
Exactly. And now just on your smartphone.
Yes, just to familiarize people with what the law is, you cannot tape record a private conversation unless both parties consent to it. And so it's important. And it's a criminal violation. It's a misdemeanor.
Yes.
And that tape recording is absolutely useless. It can't be used for any purpose. And one of the lawyer's hardest decisions is when somebody walks in with one of those, what do I do with it? Well, my practice at any rate is I don't listen to it. I don't know. I don't know if you do or not. And maybe that's between you and your conscience. But I think it's easier if the witness wants to refresh his recollection with it at some point, maybe. But it's certainly not a good thing to have. And
No, it's not. And I've actually had in some mediations where that's happened, and somebody's client illegally taped a supervisor or someone else, and it became a huge issue in the case because it was a criminal violation. So then you had that coming back at the employee.
Exactly.
So a lot of people don't know that, and because of the ease that everybody can tape record things or videotape things with their smartphones, people really don't think about the fact that in California you've got that two-party consent rule. So just FYI.
Absolutely. So what else is hot with you, topic-wise?
So on the wage an hour, in terms of misclassification, what happens when you misclassify, of course, is from the employee's perspective, they have a whole host of rights. They can come in, let's say you misclassified as exempt or you misclassified as an independent contractor. They can come in and sue for overtime, for missed meal breaks, missed rest breaks, pay stub violations, waiting time penalties, something called PAGA, which is the Private Attorneys General Act, so there's additional penalties under that. So classification is a huge issue. I mentioned the Private Attorneys General Act. That's something that allows employees on behalf of themselves and everyone else to bring claims and collect penalties on behalf, really, of the Labor Workforce Development Agency. And that's something that we're seeing being filed quite a bit, and it can be over the most technical violations. So, for example, you have a pay stub, and it doesn't include the full name of the employer, or it doesn't include the last four digits of someone's Social Security number or employee ID number. One employee can sue on behalf of every employee and collect penalties for that. So we're seeing a lot of those claims.
Just to remind our listening audience, the phone number is 661-298-5487. That's 298 KHTS, area code 661. And the email, if you want to reach us, is dennis@hometownstation.com. So call us or email us, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. We're dealing with an area today that most people have some familiarity with, but what it involves is a look at those posters you see on the wall and what they contain and what your rights are as an employee. What's the wackiest wage and hour claim that you've experienced in your practice?
The wackiest. Well, sometimes you have an employee who gets fired after they got in a big fight at work and they were caught stealing. So you've got somebody who clearly had the ability to terminate them, and they come in and say, but wait a minute, my pay stub's missing some technical thing, and they file a claim. So those are a little crazy because you just think, geez, what was the employer to do? They obviously were going to fire the person. So employers really need to check for all these little technical violations so they don't end up getting sued. So we see a lot of that. I've had all kinds of wacky claims in mediation, not so much in wage and hour, but all kinds of other types of claims. One of the more popular ones is relates to disability discrimination, people with mental disabilities. So you have somebody who is bipolar and they're running around threatening other employees and things like that. So the employees are all freaked out and scared. And they end up terminating the person, and the employee comes back and says, well, I had a mental disability and you had to accommodate it. Well, that's very difficult because how does the employer accommodate something that is threatening to other employees, yet at the same time you need to balance the interests of the employee who has a mental disability. So those are sort of wacky claims.
Yeah, it's tough being an employer in this modern era, and I think the cases where someone has violent tendencies and has got some mental issues really present a tough case for the employer, because ultimately he's responsible for providing a safe workplace for everybody. And he has to do what he has to do. But
well, and the interesting thing is now with Ban the Box that just went into effect in Los Angeles City, you have to be really careful about how you conduct a background check.
Okay, why don't you we'll go into that. We're coming up on a break right now, but that'll be an interesting one that I think our audience would be very interested in. So just write down the phone number, 661-298-5487, the email, dennis@hometownstation.com, and we'll be back on the other side.